Welcome to Independent Television. My name is Geordie Greig. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of The Independent, and it is my pleasure to have Sir John Major with me today on the 10th anniversary of Brexit. It's 47 years ago that he first became an MP, 36 years ago that he became Prime Minister. And since then, he's been an extraordinary elder statesman for the country and for the Conservatives, at a time when ex-prime ministers have not always had the highest value in currency. He's a voice of campaigning for what he believes in. He's a man who does not hold back, but he does it in a calm, authoritative, quiet way, which creates waves. Sir John, it's great to have you here. And I can't believe it is 10 years, and we spoke a lot during Brexit. What has been the impact? Can you tell us, has it been as damaging as you thought it would be?
Well, it's been very damaging, no doubt about that. I mean, most people think of the economic damage, but I think that's only part of the argument. Perhaps the Remainers should have argued this other case rather more forcibly during the campaign. But it has, as a country, made us weaker and more isolated. If you consider before Brexit, we were the principal ally to the United States. That's debatable now. And we were also a leading member of the European Union that had 500 million people. Both of those have gone. We're now 70 million people in a world of 9.5 billion. And we have considerably less clout and considerably less friendship in times of difficulty than we had before. So that's a fundamental underlying point about leaving the European Union.
So the promise was to take back control. Did that happen? What did that mean?
Well, it was an empty slogan. If we were going to take back control, to do what? To stop the boats coming? Well, that worked well. To improve the economy? That hasn't happened yet. It was just an empty slogan. It was an empty slogan to say, we don't like foreigners, let's do it all ourselves. But there's only one country in the world that is completely sovereign, and that is North Korea. And I don't think we want a society like that. We depend on allies. We're part of the Five Eyes, we're part of the United Nations, we're part of NATO. In all of those cases, we share sovereignty with other people. But apparently, on European matters, we're not to share sovereignty in the eyes of believers with our nearest neighbours. And that makes no sense to me at all. But there's also the economic impact. And that is profound. It was forecast, and for a long time proved to be the case, that we would lose between 4 and 6% of our GDP. And that has been the established figure by a whole range of authorities throughout the last 10 years of Brexit. A recent survey has just said that that has underpriced what was lost, and it's probably between 6 and 8%. But even if you take the lower figure, take just one statistic. We have lost about £100 billion worth of trade each year. That £100 billion worth of trade would have yielded about £40 billion worth of tax to the exchequer. If we'd had that £40 billion annually over the last few years, many of the difficult and unpopular decisions that have been taken would not simply have been necessary.
And the argument by the Brexiteers, it was to free us from an unaccountable, huge financial mess, the EU budgeting, and it was to allow us to choose our own laws and to control our own borders. What happened?
Well, a huge uncontrollable mess. They say, why are people still queuing up to join the European Union? We were told by the Brexiteers that once we left, the whole thing would fall to pieces, other people would seek to go. Far from it. Other people have sought to be there. So what is it that they can see that nobody else anywhere in the world can see?
So is there a certain...
Who are the gainers from having left? I don't hear the Brexiteers talking much about Brexit these days because they know in their heart that it has failed to deliver what they promised. And what they promised, of course, was never going to be delivered. They were impossible promises. But we know who the losers are. The losers are very apparent. It's every wallet, every purse, and every balance sheet in the country. They are the losers. They are known. They can be identified. But where are the gainers from Brexit? Where are the people who've actually done well out of it? I don't hear the Brexiteers talking about that. What I see is people saying, we'll now have discussions on how to make Brexit succeed. Well, if you're seeking to make Brexit succeed after 10 years, I think you are admitting tacitly that it has failed thus far. And it has failed thus far, and I think will continue to do so.
And the silence from Johnson, Rees-Mogg, from Cummings, from Gove, what do you think that says?
Well, I'd like to think there was a feeling of responsibility for what they have done, but I'm not sure that it is. But if you look at some of the things that they said, let me see if I can recall something. I think it was Michael Gove who said, after we leave, we will hold all the cards. Well, the only card they held were P45s for people who lost their jobs. There were others who said, could have been Owen Paterson, I can't be quite sure at this distance in time, that nobody was thinking of leaving the single market. Really? How extraordinary, because that's exactly what we did. Margaret Thatcher took us in. Many of them claimed to be devoted to Margaret Thatcher's policies. They took us out. And there's a whole series of quotes. It's embarrassing. Nigel Farage, of course, must have primary responsibility. He campaigned for this for a very long time. And it is something that has damaged our country. I won't say irreparably, but damaged it very significantly. And having done that, he now seeks more political power today.
You fought on a patriotic card, trying to find the arguments which were best for Britain. Does it make you angry what happened? Did you accept the vote? What was what's been your journey over the 10 years?
Well, I had to accept the vote. The British people are our masters. They heard the debate and they made a decision. So, of course, you have to accept the vote. What made me angry was the way the vote was perverted by what was said would be the outcome of leaving the European Union. What was said to be the outcome implied a land of milk and honey. Well, far from that. It implied we were going to be stronger and more sovereign. None of those things have actually come about. What has happened is that people have lost out. That's why I ask, who are the gainers? We've had this tremendous upheaval, this tremendous expenditure by the government on actually getting us out, and the cost of leaving and the cost of setting up ludicrous Brexit departments that did absolutely nothing worthwhile. The cost of the British nation has been extraordinary. And fine if that had delivered measurable gains in our lifestyle. And it hasn't.
But it must be a bitter pill for you that it's the Conservative Party, the senior members of that, who fundamentally brought this through. It was brought about by David Cameron calling for the referendum. Was that an error?
It was a very complex decision for David to call the referendum, and he called it because he could see the demand for it growing, and he wished to have the referendum at a time when he thought he could win it. He didn't call it to lose it, and it went disastrously wrong, of course. It does hurt me, and it has, I think, hurt the Conservative Party, that so many of the leaders, the Brexit campaign, were Conservatives. And I think that is something that still lingers and hampers the Conservative Party today.
Do you think it damaged them in the last election? Is there a Brexit dividend for Labour with the Tories?
It was a ludicrous result last time. I mean, the electoral system looks absolutely absurd when on 1/3 of the vote you win 2/3 of the seats. Labour won their majority of over 174, something like that, around about that figure, on 1/3 of the vote. With that share of the vote at any election in the last 100 years, they would have been badly beaten into second place. So that is the absurdity that we have shrunk to with the growing number of parties slicing up the overall vote.
So do you think it's a sign that, we're about to have our 7th Prime Minister since the referendum a decade ago? Is this a sign that Brexit has destabilised democracy in this country?
Well, I think it has. I mean, I heard a wonderful line on a radio programme, I can't claim it was mine, but a lady phoned in and said that we were now treating prime ministers like football managers. And of course, that's exactly and precisely what has happened. It cannot be right to keep changing the man at the top. They'll all be fallible. There's never been a prime minister that didn't make mistakes and wasn't fallible. But to keep changing in this short-term fashion before many people have had a sufficient time in office to actually shape their agenda. You can't suddenly shape an agenda from day one unless you're well prepared when you get into office. So none of our recent prime ministers have been that.
We'll come on to the Burnham government if that's what we're going to have. But first, I want to take us back to the populism which has affected politics in this country. And there was one man who has dominated that popular front, and that is Nigel Farage. Can you take us through his form and his tactics and his strategy, which won that debate 10 years ago?
Well, it was wholly negative, wasn't it? I mean, you saw it in UKIP. When UKIP went, he formed the Brexit party. You saw it in that. It was wholly a one-issue party, wholly negative about Europe, together with wholly undeliverable promises about what would life be like with the freedom of being unconstrained by the wicked commissioners of Europe. It was all nonsense. Total nonsense.
But he told us, and I quote you, leaving would mean that we would be taking back control.
Yes, well, I'd like to know what that actually means. What control have they been able to take back? What control have they taken back that has improved the lives of everyday people in this country because we left the European Union? Now, it may simply be that I can't see what the advantages are, but I certainly can't, and I know no one else who can.
So you said that EU migrants were wrecking the UK quality
Yes,
of life.
that was going to fall, of course. We would take back control and there'd be no unnecessary migrancy. We would be down into the tens of thousands, which I think everybody concedes we need for different reasons and different skills. But of course, none of that has happened. He implied there was going to be a much better economy. Well, none of that has happened. Now, there have been other things that have contributed to the difficulties we face. It isn't entirely Brexit. We could have foreseen the Ukraine war or the present difficulties in the Middle East and in Iran, none of which were the responsibility of the British government. But nonetheless, at the core, the absolute core, which has stultified our economy for so long, has been the knock-on effect of Brexit. A fraction of the number of people who actually went through the tunnel carrying trade to Europe before Brexit now do the same. A huge number of medium-sized firms have ceased trading entirely with Europe, because instead of having no difficulties at all and entirely free trade, they now have to deal individually with 27 countries, each with their own rules, their own wish to examine certain products when they're exported, their own paperwork, their own red tape. And it has just become impossible for small and medium-sized firms to make a profit trading with Europe with all those impediments. Now, we were told by Boris Johnson, no less, if I remember my quote correctly, that there would be no increase in non-tariff barriers to trade with Europe. Well, there's been an enormous increase in non-tariff barriers, and it has seriously dented, seriously reduced the amount of trade we have with the European Union.
And again, I come back to these Tory Prime Ministers, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson. What's going to be their legacy on trying to achieve for the country on truth, on authority, and trying to bring positivity?
Well, you tempt me, but I think I'll leave that to history to make their judgment in the light of all the events as they eventually play out. But it certainly seems, as of this moment, that the promises made have not been delivered. And the warnings that were given, not just from the Remain campaign, but from business, from everywhere really, have proved to be justified.
Do you see a day in the future when the UK may rejoin the EU in some form or other?
Well, I don't think it's imminent. There are too many blockages to successfully negotiating our way back to be full members in the near future.
So the Switzerland model, is that something?
No, I don't. That doesn't attract me at all. I think our long-term aim, and I'll come to why. Let me deal with the short-term aim first. I think the short-term aim must be rebuild relations of trust with Europe. Small steps have been taken by the present government, but they've been very timid. Just joining the customs union wouldn't get us very far. The aim within the next 5 years must be to rejoin the single market. But that will have a price. We're going to have to be absolutely honest with the British people. If we go back into the single market, we say, here are the gains we propose, and here is the price that we will have to pay for it. There must be frankness so people know what they are being asked to accept. I think the bargain will be worthwhile. Others may take a different view, but they must be given a true picture. As to whether we'll ever get back in the long term, not in the near future, I'm afraid. There's too much mistrust, too much fear that parties like Reform would break any deals and promises that were made were they to come to any form of power. So you can quite see why Europe would be disinclined. They gave us a whole series of special privileges because we asked them, the rebate, the opt-outs, and despite that, we chose to leave. So you can see why they're hesitant. But I think there is a change coming, and the change coming is the next generation. The vast vote to leave largely came from people who were elderly. As of this day, I think 68% of people think leaving was a mistake, and 32% think it was not. But of course, if we started negotiation and people saw some of the things we would have to accept, those figures would change. But the next generation grew up when we were in Europe, liked it, are internationalist by instinct. Brexit is a nationalist concept, really. Never mind other countries, it's just us, national. And nationalism is alien to the long-standing British tradition over several hundred years. And I think the next generation will return to that. So I think we will get back into Europe. I don't think it will be imminent. I think we will have to make small steps to restore trust and then slightly bigger steps. And we will have to make sure, as we do so, that we do not hide from the British nation, both what we will gain by doing that and what we will have to sacrifice in terms of doing it. It is a bargain. And just as over a shop, you hand over your money and the shopkeeper hands over your goods, that is a bargain. It is a negotiation. And that is what is going to happen with Europe. And we'll have to take it slowly and make sure everybody is fully on board. So it's not too early for people to start arguing the case, because it will take a long time. And it's complex. The number of people who actually understood every aspect of our relationship with Europe is quite small. I was Prime Minister for a long time. I was Foreign Secretary. I went to Europe more times than I can think. Did I know every single instance of what was good and bad about Europe? No, I didn't. And neither did any of the people who were expressing their views so forcibly in the campaign. It's very, very complex. We just take it slowly.
Do you think Britain should have been more forceful in appreciating what Europe
Yes, it was a bad mistake.
Grants.
It was a bad mistake. Too often people lent to the anti-European case in order to stop parliamentary difficulties and parliamentary problems without actually pointing out the advantages that we gained from Europe. Everybody talks about the cost that we paid to be a member. They don't talk about the advantages that we gained from that cost. And that is part of the preparatory debate that is going to have to be held over the next decade or more before we're seriously in a position to try and get back.
Now, his critics would say the devil has the best tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Yet Nigel Farage is probably the most popular by polling of the political leaders at this moment. How do you account for that? And what are you?
Well, he's never had any responsibility other than to speak negatively and in populist terms. But let's talk about his Reform Party, who have a ceiling to their vote, I think, and it's a ceiling that will not enable him to get into government. If there were a general election, I'm sure people would vote tactically to keep Reform out. And they do so for very sound reasons, because what is Reform? It's a ragbag, really. What's its philosophy? What's his purpose? What are its convictions? I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody talks about it. I don't hear lectures about the convictions and philosophy of Reform.
He's getting the votes.
Well, let me come to that point. He's got nothing good to offer. Why is he getting so many votes? They're wholly negative votes that the other parties have failed, which to a certain extent is true. They've had very difficult circumstances, both Labour and Tory governments, and they've got things wrong. And in some cases, badly wrong. But they know that. And I think they know how to begin to put them right. But what positivity is there about Reform? What is their unique selling brand? It's that they are opposed to Muslims and migrants. That's their unique selling brand. And when that wears out, because that is the way they operate, they'll find somebody else in order to be a scapegoat. They are certainly narrow in concept, nationalist in instinct, and hostile to those, in a quite crude way, who don't actually agree with them. They don't offer any inspiration or hope. What are their policies on the health service? I don't know. What is their foreign overseas policy other than following
But the button they push is migration.
The button they push is migration, which is falling. And so is their vote. And that will continue to happen. If the boats could stop, then I think you would see a sea change and there would be a great drop in popularity.
Is there a way to achieve that?
Well, I don't know. I'm not in government, and so I'm not up to date with what's happening. But I think there are measures being taken that will improve it. And it is undoubtedly the case that they were up at 30% in the opinion polls. They've now followed a long way down. And you now have two other parties at 20%. So margin's not that big now.
Can we talk about money in Farage? Just during the Brexit debate, he said Brexit would mean an extra £55 million per day for UK public services. It didn't happen.
No.
Can we look at money in the broader sense and the personal sense with him? Because money is one of the topics which is dominating conversations about him.
Money is the root of all progress, of course, in terms of government. With money, you can do things. Without money, you can't. But you have to be careful where the money comes from and what it is for. Let me take the Reform Party first. They have been donated, and this we know, there may be more that we don't know, but they have been donated £7 million from overseas for Reform UK, from billionaires overseas. They are in danger of becoming the fully fledged subsidiary of overseas billionaire money. That is the party, not Farage himself. But then it seems that Mr. Farage himself has been gifted £5 million. That is an extraordinary sum of money. And there seemed to be a range of explanations for it. It's for my security, he said. Then on another occasion, he said, it's for me getting Brexit through. And then on another occasion, he said, it's for me to spend exactly as I like on cars or whatever it is. So there's an unclear expectation, and he says it is nobody's business. But in or out of Parliament, he is a public figure aiming for the highest position in our land. And we need to know what obligations he may have and to whom. And that is true of every politician, and it is true of him as well. But the other point I'd make about this is rather more personal to people. Many people have a salary after tax, and after national insurance contributions of no more than £20,000 a year. That, in a working life of 50 years, from 16 to 67, is £1 million. Nigel Farage has just been gifted a sum that is equivalent to the total amount earned in 5 working lives for these people. And he seems to think it is entirely a personal matter, and it's an insult for everybody else to look at that. Well, I'm afraid I don't agree. If he were not seeking political office, maybe I would agree. But it is sophistry to say, well, I wasn't actually at the time. The fact is, he has £5 million. If I were given £5 million, I think I would feel a little obligated to the donor. So what is going on?
Is that a reflection on morality on him or on the morality of the country, where it's not having a great dent on him yet, is it?
I don't know. It's only just really becoming an issue. And it does seem to be becoming an issue, and people aren't talking about it because it's under investigation. And the investigation, of course, will tell us whether it actually fits with the rules. It won't tell us whether it is morally right for someone who is seeking to be in high office in our politics to accept such an extraordinary gift from somebody who is not even a British citizen. That is a question of personal morality that Mr. Farage would sort out with himself and justify to other people.
We've looked at past Tory Prime Ministers and your restraint in criticising them, I note, but the tone of what you're implying is pretty critical Johnson and Truss. Rishi seems to escape somewhat. Kemi, we've got a new leader who's now settling herself in. She's just won a by-election in Scotland. She's making the arguments. She's cutting through better than she has ever done. Are you hopeful from the Tory point of view?
I don't know Kemi well. I know her, of course, and I've met her, but I don't know her well. But I have watched her dispassionately from a distance grow into something significant in a leader over the last, many months. And she's now beginning to get a very distinct political persona. She is clear in what she says. If she is asked a question, she answers the question, and she answers it in terms of what she believes without any waffle, without any intent of hiding what really lies behind her answer. She's very clear. She's extremely good in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's question time and has bested the better Prime Minister, the present Prime Minister, on a number of occasions. I think she's a politician who's still growing. I think there's every chance that she will turn out to be an absolutely excellent leader, far better than anybody would have imagined when she first became there. And so I am a strong supporter of what she has achieved. It's a difficult job after a cataclysmic defeat, similar to the one we had at the last general election. And it is very difficult to carry that through. She is doing that now, but there's some things that still remain to be done. The Conservative Party, like every other party, is a coalition. It has its right wing, it has its left wing, and it has its centre. And we need to bring those three components together again. They were shattered by Brexit. And on Brexit, there are still disagreements between the different component parts, but they agree on everything else. They agree on the philosophy of the Conservative Party, and they need to be brought together.
But it was more than just Brexit. It was the leadership of the Tory party which made a lot of people say, I cannot vote Tory this time, the last election. And do you think the Tory parties have got over that damage, or do they need to still acknowledge the failures of leadership and morality in decision-making?
I think she has done that, not explicitly, because she has a party to keep together. But I think she is growing in authority within the Conservative Party. It is interesting, isn't it, in these unsettled days, nobody is even contemplating challenging her for the leadership of the Conservative Party. She is becoming the leader by general common consent. And that is very good. And I suspect that is going to continue for a long time. And she will continue to grow in the job. I have confidence that she will. And I think she will need all the help she can get in bringing those other component parts of the Conservative Party together. The Conservative Party, as an entity, when it is together, when it is speaking with a single voice, has been the most effective political party in British political history. It's had some bad times and some bad.
You have to hope so. It's not just history, and there's going to be a
hope
reinvention and a rebirth.
I do hope that. But we have got to look back at the things upon which we agree. We agree about the need for incentives to encourage personal growth and individual freedoms. We agree that there's still too much of a nanny state in this country. We agree we do need an efficient health service. We agree above all, I suppose, that we actually need a functioning Department of Defence in difficult days, because our world is different from the way it was 3 or 4 years ago. And
welfare?
Oh, well, of course, welfare.
Tell me what you would do.
Of course, welfare. We have to look at welfare. There's a very fundamental difference. I hope I've got these figures exactly right, because you've asked a fundamental question. Let me put it to you this way. When the Labour Party introduced the National Health Service and effectively the welfare state, people got smallish pensions at 65, first time they'd ever had them. But most people only lived till 68 or 69. They now have pensions that are index-linked, a little better than index-linked actually at the moment, but people are living into their 80s. Not only are they living into 80s, the belief that the health service would be so good that it would minimize illness and the cost collectively wouldn't go up has been blown out of the water by the advance of science the advance in operations, the advance in medicines, the extraordinarily effective medicines, even on minor issues that enable people to stay well and healthy well into their 80s. That cost is astronomical. And we have to look at that very carefully, because we need to sustain that, because it's not credible not to.
But that's a part of welfare, sustaining the
It's a
NHS,
part.
but it's not really the part which is the political part.
Well, it depends which part you think. I think all of the component parts seems to me are political. But if you, well, tell me which part you mean.
Well, I'm thinking of the enormous bill for taxis, for transport.
Yes. Yeah, there's a whole degree of areas where I think there's a great deal of waste. I find it, I'm pretty much on the compassionate wing of the Conservative Party, but I'm not on the soft wing of the Conservative Party. I don't think we can have people ripping off the system, and I think we do need to act on that, because I think it is still happening. And I'm afraid...
Was that the main mistake of Starmer to reverse?
Well, I'll come to that in a moment, because I think it's relevant to something else. But what I was about to say about health is that I find it very... I have no figures to back this up, but my instinct tells me it is not credible that 2 million young people have suddenly become mentally incapable of working. I cannot see how that has come about. What I do see is a large number of young men and young women who are leaving school, who write letter after letter to employers trying to get a job and don't even get a reply, which is an absolute disgrace. And we have actually, overall, successive governments have treated our young rather badly. But I do think there are areas where there are substantial savings to be made that can be put to better use than the way they are now.
To come on to leadership, and we've seen Sir Keir Starmer fall as a result of a semi-coup by his party. Now, back in the day, you had your problems with the Tory party, and you had a very simple expression to them: put up or shut up. What should he have done?
I think there was a fundamental mistake that undermined the Starmer administration. And that was when he couldn't get his social security package through a year or so ago. And that was a failure by his party, not him. Because what he was doing was necessary. I don't know every detail of it, and maybe there are bits I'd have disagreed with. But fundamentally, he was doing the right thing. And his party wouldn't let him do it, despite his huge majority. In fact, because of his huge majority. He had such a big majority. There were so many people in Parliament who had never thought they would get there and think they're only going to stay there if they please everybody in their constituency all the time.
Isn't that what leadership's about? Trying to persuade people to do
it is. And that is why it damaged him so much when he lost that particular package. And of course, that is always the danger with extremely big majorities. Francis Pym once angered Margaret Thatcher no end by saying, a majority of 40 to 50 is about right. More than that is a problem. And I have always thought that Francis was right about that.
Interesting. We are now about to have looks like a new Prime Minister. Do you have a view on the Burnham government?
Well, we haven't got one yet, but I do have some views about what is happening. I've been watching it with a certain degree of astonishment. I mean, there are 400 Labour members of Parliament, and out of those 400 members of Parliament, they cannot find a leader. I do find that's a remarkable reflection upon the calibre of people in the Labour Party. Either it is grotesquely unfair, or the representation is of a lower quality than they think it is, and a lower quality than it ought to be. Nobody from the Cabinet is actually going to stand against him, it would seem. There's going to be no competition. So Mr. Burnham, who's been a success as the mayor of Manchester and had great success, I'm told, with buses, but dealing with buses is a little different from dealing with Xi, Putin, Trump, Macron, Merz. That's a different sort of problem than dealing with buses in Manchester. And without a competition and without any knowledge of what his views are on any of these things, I don't know what it, maybe it's my ignorance, but I don't know what his views are on anything outside Manchester. He suggested in a speech the other day, in a rather curious phrase, that if things didn't meet the Macclesfield test, they wouldn't happen. Now, that may not be an exact quote, but that was the basis of it. Well, I'm not sure how widely he spreads that, but if he really thinks he's going to put his discussions with Mr. Xi or Mr. Trump through Macclesfield before he goes to meet them to discover whether they're actually satisfied, they actually satisfy the good citizens of that constituency, he's going to find himself in grave trouble.
What's going to be the defining element of him finding success or failure? Is it the economy?
It'll be growth. Growth, 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 always growth. Once we begin to get growth in this country, growth will bring with it hope. It's the fundamental part of what government is for. Government is there for the well-being and security of the country. Security is one half of it. Well-being outside military matters is the other. And well-being requires growth in the economy, growth in income, and hope that people can do the things that are just out of their reach now.
Now, you've had Rachel Reeves' job. What's your verdict on her almost 2 years, on what she's achieved or not achieved?
Well, I think some of the things she's done have been damaging. I think the obvious one that has been touted many times is increasing employers' national insurance contributions. There are so many young people who can't get jobs, and part of the reason they can't get jobs is that they're now too expensive to employ. The minimum wage has gone up, and I have some sympathy for that. And when we can afford it, of course I want people to have a decent salary. But piling these extra costs, quite a lot of them on employers, the belief that seems to be there in the Labour Party, that there is a vast degree of money that can be tapped without loss from people who are comfortably off or wealthy. The very wealthy can move their capital. The mega wealthy already have. The number of people who've moved their money and their investments out of the United Kingdom since the budgets recently is remarkable. There are many people in the middle who can't go abroad and who are now tax traps between 100,000 income and 120,000. Sounds a vast amount of money, but if you earn 150,000, you pay 45% on all your income, even if it's your pensions that you have saved up for all your life. You've been investing in private pensions so that you're able to go around the world or to whatever it is when you're elderly and look after your children and your grandchildren. And if you have £150,000, you will lose £70,000 in tax. Now that is beyond what is secure
as always,
in a modern society.
Small tax, big growth. What's your advice to Burnham? As there's some in his party are urging him to turn left, to be what they call soft left, which is an interesting term.
I don't think he should turn. The trouble is, it's a slogan. Turning left effectively means tapping the money tree and increasing benefits and doing. We haven't got the money to do that. I think he is probably going to. I think the new chancellor, if there is one, is probably going to have to put up taxes to meet the requirements of defence, never mind anything else. They'll ransack a certain amount of money from other budgets, no doubt, but I doubt they'll ransack enough. I think there's a very reasonable chance that they may have to put up taxes. And if he runs away from that and doesn't fund defence properly, or if he doesn't meet the necessity of the moment, the thing that governments, it seemed to me, have lost is the willingness to say no. We can't do this because we don't have the money. The government is not in a position to do everything that they would like to do for the nation. And the nation cannot expect them to ever be in that position, however wealthy we are. We should, in any event, leave decisions about money and welfare as much as possible to the individual by leaving them the money to care with for themselves. But spiteful things that they have done, like the increase in value-added tax on private schooling. Many of the countries across Europe actually allow you to set the cost, a part of the cost of private education against their tax, precisely because it saves the state having to educate the child at the taxpayer's expense. In our country, we're doing quite the reverse. People are educating a child at their own expense. And these aren't all rich people. There are many people where both parts of the marriage go out to work, and the whole of one part of it is simply used to pay for those education fees. They would have had to be paid by the taxpayer. And now they put it up 20%. A lot of children have been tossed out of their school. They're quite innocent in this matter. It's a vindictive piece of work. It's the nastiest thing I think they've done.
Do you feel any hope, as we are very likely to have a new Prime Minister in the next month? What's your advice to the future Prime Minister?
Be clear in his mind before he does it. Before he has lobbies speaking in his ear, telling him what has this short-term advantage or that short-term advantage, or what dishes the Tories or Reform or Liberal. Let him understand and set out what his purpose is going to be in government. And let him frame his policies within that purpose. And the first purpose must be to grow the economy and to ensure that we have adequate defence. Those must be the two central pillars of what the next Prime Minister is going to have to do. And he should do what is necessary to achieve that, not what is convenient for politics.
And interestingly, in your memoir, written after you left office, one of the things you talked about is trying to find a voice. And you think, I rarely found my own authentic voice in politics. I was too conservative, too conventional, too safe, too often, too defensive, too reactive. This seems to be the absolute opposite of what you are now.
Yes, I think it probably is, but it's absolutely the position that Mr. Burnham will be in.
Yeah.
He's coming straight in maybe a month, but if he becomes Prime Minister in a month, he's had no time to sit and reflect. I didn't. I'd been in extremely busy jobs. I'd been Chief Secretary of the Treasury, I'd been Foreign Secretary, I'd been Chancellor. They were all jobs that commanded 24 hours a day. I had not had the time.
You'd also worked in the private sector.
I had also worked in the private sector, yes. I also had a life outside politics and worked in a life outside politics. But even so, I hadn't had, and in retrospect I regret it, I hadn't had the time to sit and reflect very carefully on exactly what it was I wished to achieve and how I wished to go about it. And Mr. Burnham is not going to have that either if he's parachuted in. If there's no contest and he's not questioned about these matters. And it's when you're questioned and pushed about them that you realize the fallacy in what you have to do, because people will point out the defects. And it's not a hostile act, it's actually rather a friendly act if they point out the defects in what you're going to do. Much better to change your plans and find they've all gone awry after you've put them into operation.
Final question. When do you think, as you would like, a Conservative government will next be in power?
Well, I ideally hope to see another Conservative government. It isn't impossible, the way politics could go, that could even be at the next general election, maybe in coalition. But certainly the election after that, I would hope to see it back. But there's a long way to go from where we are. There's a lot to show people that we are the Conservative Party of tradition and not the Conservative Party who's took a slight walkabout outside our normal principles in the early part of this century, well, in the early 20s.
And that was Brexit. John Major,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking on the 10th anniversary, and we look forward to finding some hope and some gains in politics. Many, many thanks.
I hope so too.
Thank you.
Thank you.